I went to have some blood tests done yesterday, and it was a struggle to try and get the blood to come out. So in fact, I've got to go back on Monday. This is now the third time in a week that I've done this, and I don't quite understand what the problem might be. But there we are. In the process, the person who was doing this realised that I had got a profile and was on YouTube and had done a reality TV show called The Circle. She'd watched it, and it was quite entertaining, really. But she asked me a very interesting question. What was my politics? What was my political position if I was doing YouTube videos about politics? And Bionic Rasta asked the same sort of question. Middle of the road liberal politics has had its day, Tim. Your outlook is out of touch with much of Middle England. The left-wing middle-class youth of the university cities, the Islamists and ethnic groups will follow Corbyn, but it won't be enough to win a majority, not even close. As the support isn't widespread, unlike Reform, who are hoovering up discontented Tories, the working class town is shunned by Labour and possibly even the bro vote. Where I agree is that Corbyn's party will eat into Labour, Liberal, left votes and Greens unless they agree a pact in some seats enough to edge out Labour in favour of Reform and the SNP in Scotland. If Wes Streeting, who has an ambition to be leader, gets booted and others like him, then that is of no great loss. Labour is all out of ideas. It's the same old Blairites in ad hoc, too big business. At least with the hard left and hard right, there were some differences. You knew where you stand with them. People want real change. Labour, not Tory, not Liberal, will deliver that. Labour nor Tory nor Liberal will deliver that. I don't know what you're saying. But anyway, I thought I've got a few minutes, so I thought I would try and explain what my political position is. I was going to say what my religious position is. Both are slightly confused. But politically, I don't believe I've moved at all since I was younger. I believe I belong to what I think Mrs. Thatcher described as the wet branch of the Tory party, the bit that is dominated by figures like Norman St. John Stevens, who developed the committee system, which is still used today. And I think we probably can't afford to do something unless we have the money to do it, and that seems a perfectly reasonable principle. But at the same time, we have social responsibilities. Now, when I meet people from the Labour Party, they always say to me, when are you coming over to us? And then when we talk, they realise that I've often got views which are more left-wing than theirs, but I still don't believe I belong in the Labour Party. I also don't believe that I belong in the present Conservative Party, the party ruled by Kemi Badenoch, and I certainly don't belong in the Reform Party. Why? Because I infiltrated UKIP, which is the prior name of Reform, frankly, to see whether or not it was racist. If it wasn't, I have my own gripes with Europe. I lived in Europe for long enough to know that Europe is desperately in need of reform. It's still in need of reform. I don't believe, and I've never believed, in leaving Europe. But in giving Europe a jolt, that will be a good thing. I think Brexit did give Europe a major jolt, and Europe has reformed a little bit. I think it's creeping back into its old ways at the moment, and our job now is to realign with Europe. If we don't realign with Europe, we are the weaker. We can try our Fortress Britain nonsense, but we will collapse. In the end, we cannot survive without our neighbours. And so I think that's basically my position. I think Reform UK picks up the racism and the prejudice that UKIP left behind. As I say, I infiltrated UKIP At some point, I identified racism. It was a person called David Coburn, who was an MEP, and he made racist jokes about Humza Yousaf, and Humza Yousaf suggested that we should go big, and the next day I found myself on the front page of the Daily Mail, I found myself on the BBC, and I remember thinking a great deal about it and thinking, well, what can I say to Farage and to Farage's claims that this was just a joke? And I decided, even at that point, I decided that Farage, in my mind, was simply an emanation of Tony Curtis in Some Like It Hot, as he was imitating Cary Grant. And so that's where that voice comes from. Farage came out and said it's just a joke. And I said, well, you can't toss it off over a pint of beer. And that, I think, was the quotation. And I would stick to that. Racism is racism. It doesn't matter whether you're trying to be funny or whether you're being serious and perverse. Racism is how it's understood by the victims of racism, and racism, a racist joke, is simply a misunderstanding of the harm that you are doing, and that harm is manifest on a daily basis in Reform UK, which others, vulnerable people, migrants, people from Europe and so on, it others vulnerable people. And it's not that other political parties don't do the same. They do. They do. But Reform UK and UKIP do it to excess. So I hope that gives you some idea of my political positions. And yes, I'm very sympathetic to some of the Labour ideas. I'm very sympathetic to the Lib Dem ideas and to some of the Conservative ideas. I'm not sympathetic at all to anything that Reform's got to offer.